All right, hi there. This is Dr. Matthew J. Traum from Engineer Inc. The purpose of this video is to either remind you or to introduce for the first time, if you've not seen it before, the Reynolds transport theorem, and specifically the mass conservation and momentum conservation versions of that theoretical equation. What we're going to do is apply those models to an interesting fluid mechanical phenomenon called a hydraulic jump. And I have developed a laboratory which you guys will run some experiments on, which is called a hydraulic jump interrogator. This is one of the hands-on learning modules, HOLM, hands-on learning modules, laboratory experiments that is produced by my company. And so at the end of the presentation, I'll give you guys a tutorial on how to use this at-home lab experiment to measure some important parameters for hydraulic jumps. Before I jump into the lecture, let me just explain how the lecture and the videos are organized. I find that students can really focus and pay attention on what I'm saying in these presentations for about 7 minutes. So when I hit the 7-minute mark, I'm going to wrap up the video, and that will give you an opportunity to get up, take a break, maybe go to the restroom. But please do come back because there are multiple videos in each lecture. Each video, again, is about 7 minutes long to match student attention span, and we'll just put one video after another until we get through the entire slide deck, and so that combination of all those videos will make up this particular lecture. So that's how things are organized. Okay, so without any further disruption, let's move on into the presentation. So we've got 6 objectives that we're going to achieve with this presentation. The first is I'm going to describe and give examples for you of engineering hydraulic jumps that are actually out there in the world. So applications to or for this particular fluid mechanic phenomenon. Second, I'm going to give you a qualitative explanation as to why hydraulic jumps form, and I'm going to give you an analogy between hydraulic jumps and sonic booms. It turns out that the underpinning mathematics between hydraulic jumps and sonic booms are very similar, and so in many ways a hydraulic jump is analogous to a sonic boom, and I'll show you how the math leads you to that conclusion. With knowledge developed from that analysis, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hydraulic jump interrogator and some of the important parameters that you'll look for when you run the interrogator experiment, in particular the relationship between the volume flow rate and the diameter of the hydraulic jump. Then we're going to get a little bit more quantitative, and I'm actually going to solve Reynolds transport theorem and show you how I did it, both for mass conservation and momentum conservation around a radial hydraulic jump. So you'll be able to see how the equation was applied to relate a bunch of fluid mechanical parameters to one another. I'm then going to use those results from Reynolds transport theorem to derive a single expression where all the parameters for a hydraulic jump are related to one another. So that's going to be our theoretical model that we're going to use. And finally, I'm going to show you guys how to run the experiment. You will actually be running these experiments yourselves, taking experimental data, some of the key parameters you'll measure yourselves by hand, and then I'm going to show you how the experimental results should match up with the theory that we figured out in the previous step. So that is a rundown of the objectives that we are going to achieve in this lecture presentation. The first one, of course, is to describe and give examples of engineered hydraulic jumps and their applications. So let's start in Wisconsin. I lived north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin for several years, and slightly north of my town there was a town called Cedarburg, and Cedarburg was quite interesting because it had essentially a wild river running through it. The river started farther up north in the state and ran through this town of Cedarburg, and it was a very rapidly flowing river, and so some engineers built into the river a spillway that created a hydraulic jump, and the purpose of the Cedarburg River hydraulic jump right outside the town of Cedarburg was to reduce the flow velocity of the river as the river flowed through the town. Now, this was important for 2 reasons. First, If the velocity of the river were quite high and somebody accidentally fell in, it would be difficult to rescue them. So the hydraulic jump slowed down the velocity of the river. And then the second benefit was that slowed river velocity also led to reduced soil erosion along the shorebed. There were a number of houses right on the Cedarburg River, and the low velocity river water running through the city induced minimal shoreline erosion, and so those houses were kept safe from essentially loss of shoreline. Okay, so here is a picture of the spillway, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit greater detail, but what I want you to see is that there's essentially two regions of flow. So up here we have the fast-moving kind of wild river water, and it goes over the spillway, and then there's this very distinct barrier here between the fast-moving fluid that's going over the spillway and the slow-moving fluid that is downstream of this transition point. This is one application to slow down river water as a river enters a village or a town. Another application of hydraulic jumps is in flood cooling of machining applications. So this is just a milling application, and if you're milling at very high speeds and you're milling difficult to machine metals, you use a technique called flood cooling, where you essentially take the cooling fluid and just spray it as fast as possible at the workpiece and the tooling to keep everything cool as you're machining. And it turns out, if you look here, there actually are two different regions of fluid. So it turns out that this flood cooling is actually creating a hydraulic jump. So there's this region of fluid here in the center near the tool that looks very different than this region of fluid out here. And I've actually denoted the boundary between those two fluid regions with this blue dotted line, so you can actually see the difference there. So this shape in the Cedarburg River is a hydraulic jump, and this shape in this flood cooling application is also a hydraulic jump. So these are two of the applications for this fluid mechanical phenomenon, slowing down rivers and flood cooling in manufacturing and machining. Okay, so I've hit now the 7-minute mark, so I'm going to take a pause. This is the end of video 1. So please take a break, and when you're ready, come back and we will start video 2. All right, see you soon.